Hi everybody, today I'm going to be talking to you about using the Cornell note-taking system when you're in a lesson or when you're watching a lecture or maybe an online video. Now this is a really effective method of taking notes because the way it's designed is to help you to summarise the information, and then there are a couple of activities which help you to embed it in your long-term memory so that you don't just take the notes, stick them in a file and forget about them. So the first thing you need for this is an A4 page, maybe a notebook. You can buy Cornell note-taking notebooks online on Amazon and so on, but I would normally just draw it out on a standard exercise book because it only takes a couple of lines drawn on the page. So you have your A4 page, and then down the margin you'll draw a line, maybe 3/4 of the way down. This distance here should maybe be an inch or a couple of inches. And then the bottom, maybe 4 or 5 lines on the page, you're going to have your summary section. So you've divided your page into 3 sections and you put your title at the top, possibly with the date, the teacher's name, the name of the video if you're watching something online. And then in the main section of the page, you take your notes. Now these should be bullet points. They should be really short, focusing on new knowledge. So don't just write everything down. If you already know something, if you're already clear about it, you don't need to waste the space in your brain and your short-term memory in writing it down. Focus on jotting down the new knowledge as you're listening. Then, after you've taken the notes, immediately after you've stopped the video or left the lecture, you should move on to section 2. And this is the keyword column. Now, as I say, it should be about 1 inch or 2 wide and extending maybe about 3/4 the height of your page. And in this column, you should jot down key pieces of vocab. So it might be words that you want to look up later on that you're not quite sure of the definition of, or it might be a word that you think, I really need to remember that. I know what it means, but I must use that in my next essay, for example. It could be questions that you want to think about, ask your tutor, ask your teacher. And I would say keep this quite short again, so maybe up to 10 points. Don't overwhelm this column, because if you put more than 10 bits of vocabulary in here, it's going to be quite a task to try and remember them all. So really narrow down, reduce the information to the key ideas. And then I would probably do this maybe a few hours later or even the next day. I would complete this summary section here. Use your vocab from your keyword section to write a summary of the lecture in full sentences in the bottom. And the reason why you should leave a little bit of time between step 2 and step 3 is so that you're coming back to the knowledge the day after a little bit later, and by coming back to it and having to make your brain work to retrieve that knowledge and to recall what happened in the lecture, you are practicing that process of embedding it in the long-term memory. And then don't just leave this page, put it in your file and forget about it, but come back to it when you're writing your essay, for example, and say, right, which of these key words do I need? How can this summary section work in my introduction or as a section of my essay? Before you're doing an exam, come back and say, right, do I still know all of these key words? Can I put them on flashcards and use them for my revision? So before you start making your Cornell notes, a few things to remember here. Prepare your page so that you're ready for the lecture. Know why you're watching the lecture or the talk. So you need to keep really focused so that you don't get distracted by just writing everything down. So for example, if you want to write an essay on the presentation of women in Othello and you're watching a video which is about Othello in general, it's going to take a lot of your page, your short-term memory, if you're writing down things about racism in Othello as well. So make sure that your focus is quite tight and that you know exactly what you're looking for to get out of that lecture. And then make sure you take your time afterwards to consolidate, to fill in points 2 and point 3. So to model this, I have an example here, and this is some notes that I've taken this morning from watching a lecture online that was done by a teacher at our school called Mrs. Machin. And the heading for the lecture for the talk was the integrity of knowledge, so I've just popped that at the top. And then you can see in the central section here, I've taken my notes. And if we have a close look at these notes, you can see that I have kept them really short. So here I've said heightened emotion can help memory. So I'm just putting in key prompts there really to help me remember what happened in the lecture. Here you can see I've got this in quotation marks at the start and at the end there, because I want to remember that that's a quotation from the lecture. So if I was going to quote it in an essay in future, I'd know how to do that properly. And I've done a video about including quotations and referencing and so on elsewhere on this thread. You can also see I've been jotting down keywords. I've jotted down the title of a book that I might want to look back at later. And then here, I'm categorising my knowledge. So these first bullet points have been kind of topics in and of themselves. And then I've got this bullet point, which is called strategies. And then I've listed the strategies here. So I'm using different types of bullet points and indenting those bullet points so I can see that all of these bullet points here relate specifically to this topic, rather than maybe this one or this one. So think about the layout of your page and how that layout can help you to organise your knowledge as well. So what I've done after watching the lecture is I've got a highlighter and I've just reread my notes and I've been highlighting the key points that I want to remember. So for example, I've picked out the word empowering. I want to think about how knowledge can empower the individual. I've thought about showcasing your knowledge as a teacher. I thought about how knowledge needs to be authentic, but also needs to be flexible as well. And then I'm just going to highlight this because I think this idea is quite useful. We need to have direct instruction of that knowledge from the teacher. So then, immediately after listening to the lecture, what I've done is work on my keyword section. So I've based this on the ideas that I've highlighted and I've just pulled them out here so I can see them more clearly. So I've got empowering, showcasing authentic quality knowledge, flexible knowledge, and I'm just going to put in here as well, I'm just going to add in direct instruction. So no more than 10 words, I would say, or 10 ideas in this column, but what you can see is that I've really condensed the information from the lecture into this column. And by doing that, I've reprocessed the information again, I've thought about it all again, and I've decided what's going to be useful for me. So logically, that's going to help me to remember it, because I processed the information once in the lecture, I've processed it after the lecture because I've been reducing it down, and then the day after the lecture, I'm going to process it for a third time by completing this summary section at the bottom. So I'm going to use my keywords from this column and put them in the summary section. I'm going to write it in full sentences so that I really am taking the time to think it through and to process it properly in my mind. So I'm going to write in here, knowledge is empowering and teachers need to showcase authentic quality knowledge. I'm going to say here the lecture gave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 strategies for doing this. Going back up, I'm just going to tick these off as I go. So I've got that one, I've got that one. I need to have something in there about flexible knowledge, yet students' knowledge needs to be flexible and adaptable to different situations. So I'm going to take that off, and I need something about direct instruction. So one strategy that can help achieve this is direct instruction. Okay, so I've processed this information a number of times. So by doing that, I've been embedding it in my long-term memory. And then later on, because I'm going to keep my notes nice and neat, if I wanted to write an essay on this, or if I wanted to revise this for the exam, I would go back, and this keyword column is absolutely essential. I would go back and again, I would tick off to see if I'd included all these ideas in my essay, or I'd use these to make flashcards to revise the information for an exam. So thanks very much for listening. I hope this was really helpful for you, and make sure you check out the other videos on the thread as well.